Was like, this is really sticky, sorry.
It's okay.
Holy smokes. Look at that.
Oh, wow.
See, I didn't have any problem with the last one, but I understand that some people.
Do I get 2 or 1, Catherine?
There, I got 2.
Did I give you 2?
Yeah.
It should be 2 pages.
I got
Okay.
2 pages.
Do I have the correct 2 pages?
Yeah.
Yes, you did.
Oh, good Lord, woman. And you turn them over? All right.
We are recording, so you am I good?
I got 60 seconds. I'll be fine.
All right.
I just want to try and get this thing started on time because there's a lot of items.
Catherine, do you need any other presentations pulled up?
Okay, it's 1:30.
I didn't see it.
So we have a wandering around and working our way to the table. I'd like to get started on time because we do have 4 information items, and Catherine has been kind enough to, I'm pretty sure, present all of them. Yes, that's very sweet of her. So we'll call it to order at 1:30. We do have a quorum, and we will do introductions. Jason?
Jason Doshtown, Palmer Lake.
Junior, you're up.
Junior Rodriguez from CDOT.
Is it here or here?
Michelle Davis, CDOT, local agency.
Hi, I'm Amy Kelly from the Air Force Academy.
Rick Orphan, Fort Carson.
Victoria Chavez, El Paso County.
Darren Horsemeyer, Schriever Air Force Base.
Karen Birchtold, Manitou Springs.
Sally Riley, City of Woodland Park.
Brian Vitulli, City of Colorado Springs, Mountain Metro Transit.
Larry Manning, Town of Monument.
John Lusatos, PPACG.
Tim Roberts, City of Colorado Springs.
And we'll start with staff and then go to the audience. Jessica?
Jessica Bechtel, PPACG.
William Mast, PPACG. Doug Waller, Waller Engineering. Mark Murphy, PPACG.
Catherine?
And Catherine Wenger, PPACG.
Randy Williams, City of Fountain. Do we have any changes to the agenda today? No. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Public comment. Is there anyone in the audience who would like to comment on items that are not on the agenda? Any comments on the minutes? Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
What?
You want to second it? I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? John, Board of Directors report.
For the Board of Directors meeting that was held on November 13th, there were only really 3 items, I think, of interest to you here, maybe 4, excuse me. They had a presentation on the Front Range Rail governance options that they talked about in depth. There was I provided a presentation on transportation funding, which I think most of you got a PDF of in the email to you yesterday.
It was riveting.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait, I sense some sarcasm there.
No.
4 or 5 last.
And, all right.
That was very, very good.
I'm going to say, and then there was a transit report that Brian gave him, actually was well received
That was
and
really
very well done. Although I think the graphics kind of carried it, but that's.
Yeah.
And then there was also a discussion of the PPACG the 2020 work plan. So those were the items, Madam Chair. If anyone has any questions.
Usually leave it on. If there's no questions for John, we'll go on to item 6, action items. Tip amendment number 10. Catherine?
Catherine Wenger, Transportation Planner, PPACG. I'll be up here for all of them, so I'm not going to repeat my name. Okay, so we have received two requests to amend the current TIP, which is the 2019 through 2022 TIP. And the first one was from CDOT to adjust funds, or to, add a project for US 24 West Bridge replacement. This is a funding source of federal bridge on state highway funding. It's funding that comes to the region, and they're reprogramming it to this project. The updated cost is $2.3 million. And then the second amendment request is by PPACG to reduce the funds needed for the statewide travel survey model. We originally programmed $1 million to do the travel survey that would be used for input into our travel model. Since then, we worked with CDOT headquarters to kind of adjust to see how much each of the COGs or MPOs would need to use from their region, and our estimate has been decreased, so that $300,000 is going to go back into our pool to be reallocated to other projects. So that's good news for everybody who needs some money. And so just recommending approval of the TIP amendment.
So moved.
Any
Second.
comments? We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Catherine. Item 7A, Safety Targets 2020.
Yeah, right. So every year we are required to set safety targets. These are for the federal performance measures, for the 5 measures that you see in the memo, for fatalities, fatality rates, serious injury rate, and then also number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries combined. We do this based on new data that we get every year, and we work in coordination with CDOT, and they provide us the data. So as an MPO, we can either choose to support the state targets that they set for the entire state, or we can create targets for our own region. The last 2-3 years, I think we've done this. We've chosen to support the state targets because we feel like there's supporting the state targets still helps the region as well, so we don't create new ones. In the packet, you have a presentation that I've created just to give you some more background. I won't go into it since we've done this multiple years, but just in case you need a little more information, it talks about what the safety targets are and how CDOT has come to their targets. The targets that they have, their updated targets for this year are listed, and then there's also data for the region to compare what our data is looking like. Our data looks similar to theirs, where we're seeing some decreases, but we're starting to see an increase now that we're seeing an increase in vehicle miles traveled throughout the state and the nation as well. So we have a similar thing. And then also, as I pointed out last year, we still have an issue with our serious injury crash data. It's not getting, it's specifically for our region, the way it's transferred to the Department of Revenue who collects it, it's not transferring correctly. So it looks like we have a large drop in serious injuries, but we probably do not. It's just not reporting correctly. So they're still working on that. Apparently it's going to be a longer time frame than we initially thought, so it might take a couple years to get that back into the system correctly. So we're still to be determined.
Victoria?
Thank you so much for telling us that, because I had no idea, and I was just getting ready to use some crash data. So had I not known that there was an issue, now I can have them look at things a little differently. So thank you for sharing that very important information.
And it's a pretty dramatic decrease, too. There was also a change in the definition of serious injury at a similar time frame. So there's a couple pieces that have made that look different than it has in the past. And so staff is recommending that we adopt the state targets again this year. If you'd like to set our own, then we would need to come up with suggestions and targets based on our data, which is fine as well.
This is Amy Kelly. I had a question about the last slide of the presentation, about the next up in terms of bridges, pavement. Are those targets that will be set at a later date, or is that part of this target setting?
Yes, thank you. I meant to mention that. So there's also, in addition to safety targets, we also have pavement condition and other, like air quality performance targets, and those are actually set every 4 years, so they are not as often as the safety. And so, or 2, depending on if CDOT decides they want to do a mid-year update or a mid-cycle update. And so CDOT has chosen to do that update. So it's going to be at a 2-year update, and that's next year. We're going to have to set new targets or support the state targets for these measures as well. So we have current measures that are being updated by the state, and they'd like us to update ours as well. So that'd be to be determined, but probably mid-next year. You'll see me back up here with those.
Any other questions for Catherine? Thank you, Catherine.
Catherine, are you looking for a head nod at this time?
I was going to say, if you object, you should probably say something now.
Yeah, I have no objection. I think we should use the same ones as CDOT as we've done in the past.
Okay.
Just
Yeah.
my suggestion. And I'm seeing nods.
Yeah.
And I was gonna, and I can I'm bringing this back for action item for recommendation to the board next month, but it's good to know that we can move forward this way. Thank you.
Thanks, Victoria. Item 7B, multimodal options funding.
Okay. So to continue the conversation from last month, talking about the multimodal option funds call for projects for our region and the just over $6.5 million that we have for allocation, based on the suggestion from last month, we've created some PPACG specific recommendations, application, and scoring criteria. We try to keep it as simple as possible and base it on, are you ready to go? Because this money needs to be spent, not just obligated, but spent sooner than 2023, or by 2023, excuse me. And so that was a big portion of the criteria was, are you ready to go? Another portion was, have you talked with CDOT? Do they say that this project is good, ready to go? That'll be a part of the application process. Additionally, we have, do you meet the goals of the multimodal option funds? Will you have your local match available, which is a big piece, 50%. So that's kind of the main pieces of that is, do you meet the goals, and will you be ready? And do you meet the criteria of those of the types of projects that are required? The application is just pretty similar to outline to help fill out the scoring criteria and do that. So for the actual scoring process, we are suggesting having a scoring workshop where we would review the applications and prioritize those projects based on year and selection and scoring criteria, and based on what CDOT's recommendations are. And so those are the recommendations, and the schedule was the last thing I wanted to mention. We also have a recommended schedule. Let's see. So we would do, if we felt it was necessary, we could do a final approval of the application and scoring criteria next month. January, we could start the call for projects open, do about a month and a half until the draft applications would be due, and then those would be reviewed by CDOT for initial okay and scoring, or approval of that. And then if we needed any adjustments, it would be by the end of February for final applications. And then we do a scoring meeting mid-March, and then take it through the committees and hopefully final approval in April, so that we could get these projects moving and the money spent by that 2023 deadline.
John?
Catherine, did we ever hear back from Wendy or Kathleen Collins about the Tabor issue? And if not, are they on the phone?
I did hear back from Andy Cartian. This is Kathleen from CDOT.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
So I emailed Andy, and he emailed back that, from what he understands of it, that it wouldn't be an issue. However, he says he recommends talking to an attorney about it. So he sort of said, no, it doesn't apply to Tabor because it's an appropriation, but at the same time, he recommended talking to an attorney just to be certain.
So for those of you...
Do you guys have do you have some attorneys that work for your organization to check with, or...
Okay, thanks, Kathleen. So for those of you who are applying and are concerned about the Tabor, you have one person at CDOT that thinks that it's not. So, but you should check with an attorney. I'm not sure how helpful that is.
You know what? I just realized I was advised guys maybe to check with the Attorney General's office just to confirm as an idea? And CDOT, someone here at CDOT, I can go ahead and check on that and get back with you.
That would be terrific if we could get something in writing, because I think there are jurisdictions that will either ask for a very number of projects based on if it counts against the Tabor cap. If it counts against the Tabor cap, they'll probably reduce their ask. If it doesn't count against the Tabor cap, then I think then it becomes trying to find your match money. So I think that's very important. And the fact that it's an appropriation versus something else, I don't know enough about Tabor to know how that makes a difference. So anything we could get in writing and pass on to our members so that they could put that into consideration when they put in their applications would be appreciated.
Yep, I'll
Thanks.
get an answer, and then I can send out an email to you guys as soon as I hear something back. I need to figure out the process for how to make inquiries to the Attorney General, but I will find out and get it for you.
Thank you.
Kathleen, I think you can go through, this is Wendy, I think you can go through OSMB, start with Eric and see if Eric can help you get to the right person.
Okay. Okay, I can definitely do that. Okay, thanks, Wendy.
And I don't know if either of you on the phone can hear me. I hope you can, but I would say even if the Attorney General makes a decision, that really doesn't necessarily apply to municipalities, because Colorado Springs, if I remember correctly, is double tabored. So I don't want the Attorney General to think they've made a ruling that really applies to every municipality, and the state has to, or the county has to follow the state rules. So I don't know if it's really worth their while, John, or if each of the individual entities should just ask their own attorneys.
Yeah,
that
that's
way
fine.
we don't have to waste the Attorney
Yeah,
General's time.
if you guys want to do it your own due diligence, that's fine. We were only trying to help. So it sounds like Wendy and Kathleen, everyone's going to sort of ask their own attorney based on their own Tabor situation. So I appreciate the offer to keep tracking this down and the work that you've done so far. But it sounds like they'll go ahead and take it from here. So,
Yeah.
but thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. We just want to be as much help as we can be.
Yeah, we'll save that when we actually need it. And then I have a question. Which municipalities and or jurisdictions are applying for these funds, or have thought about it, or considered it, or any of that? Okay. Well,
If we meet the 12% poverty rate.
Okay. Jason, you got nothing? Yeah, I'm not going to either. But Tim, did you have a question? You want to turn on your microphone? Okay. Sorry, Brian had a question this whole time.
So thanks, Catherine. I have a couple questions. So I just wanted to make sure this item in this month's packet, is it any different than the materials you had in last month's packet?
It is a little bit. This is
Okay.
the proposed specific application and criteria for
Okay.
PPACG. It looks similar to the criteria, or not the criteria, but the application from other ones, but I've adjusted it to be
Okay.
specific to ours.
Okay. All right. And I agree with the schedule. I would rather not see this get delayed any further than what the schedule says. But if this is November and we're going to have to approve it next month, does the board have to approve it also? Because that would be in January. Does the board have to approve this application process?
Oh, not the application process, no.
Okay. All right.
I wouldn't think so unless somebody has issue with it. But normally
Okay.
what the board does is say, hey, TAC, you guys are our experts, you develop a recommendation. And the application is part of that whole process. So if you're good with it, I think we're good. The only
Okay.
thing I think that would need to go to the board is the actual recommendation for funding.
Yeah, okay, all right. So we'll approve all of this next month, and then the call will go out January 1st.
And if you're okay with it this month and you don't feel like you need to take an action on it, that since it doesn't need to go to the board, then that's perfectly fine as well. I just wanted to give you some extra time with it in case we needed to make adjustments to it.
Okay.
Yeah, our standing sort of approach when time allows is bring it to the committee, be that the CAC or the board or you guys, once for information and then once again for action. If you're all good with it now and you need more time for the application side of it and you want to make sure it doesn't change, you can say, yeah, this is it, let's just move forward. That's fine. But again, we don't want to be forcing anything on you. Want to make sure you have plenty of time to look at it but then we also want to make sure you have plenty of time to fill out the application. So however you guys want to do it, but that's why we bring it once for information and then once for action. If you guys don't need it and we're just annoying you by bringing it to you too many times,
You're not.
we can certainly make a change there.
Okay, all right, thank you. And I just have one.
Is that about it? Is that about it?
Yeah.
Is that about it?
I don't think Brian's
I have one more question here. So, looking at the scoring criteria on page 27, so it looks like there was an attempt to align the criteria with the goals,
Yes.
but there's an extra criteria in there that says connected and integrated multimodal system, and there's 15 points, 15 possible points for that. While I don't disagree with that, the other 4 criteria are aligned directly with the goals that are in your memo. So where did that 5th criteria come from, the connected and integrated multimodal system?
That one's actually the overarching goal of the multimodal option funds. So that is actually like the bigger goal that was pulled out of what the guidance that was provided by CDOT and the Transportation Commission. And so we felt that encompassed more projects that fell within the eligibility. So like the seniors aging in place could limit a lot of projects, or just the safe routes to school. So I think the integrated multimodal system is the overarching goal of the funds, and then these other ones are smaller, more specific types of projects that fit within that. So that was my thinking on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, so I'm assuming that we follow the same rules as the TIP where we can't request more funds than are available, right?
That's up to you all, but it seems reasonable not to ask for more.
I think this would follow all of our TIP policies and procedures that have already been adopted, which is you can't ask for any more of a funding source than what's available.
Okay.
And quite frankly, why would you want us to decide your projects for you? You guys have to have some triage within your own organization.
Yeah.
Is there a breakdown by, I'm sorry, I wasn't waiting because you looked at me. Is there a breakdown by year we need to stick with?
As far as amount of money?
Yeah, that we can apply for by year, or is it just the lump sum?
I was just thinking the lump sum so that we didn't limit it to if we can get all the projects in 1 year, and then that was the plan.
Perfect, that's all I needed to know, thank you.
Unless CDOT local agency thinks they're, I just wanted to make sure. Like, look over there.
Sally?
Back to the timeline and the schedule. We do our draft applications, and Catherine gets those, and then she forwards them to CDOT. There's only 1 week for CDOT to do their review, looks like, and have responses. Is CDOT staffed to be able to do that? Can they turn them around that quickly?
I thought I gave 2 weeks on that.
Yeah, it looks
Because
like
they
2
did say
weeks.
they only needed a week, but I think I gave them 2.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Catherine, this is Wendy. Do you want a on-the-ground look at the applications? You just want them to take a cursory review on the applications out of the local agency group? Because there's no way that LaShawn and her group can do review in 2 weeks.
Okay. I mean, I wasn't advised that there would need to be on-the-ground review, but if we need to move up the schedule or adjust it, I can try to do that. But what do you think,
The
LaShawn?
one thing I have concern with is that we never did a real thorough look at the projects in the past, and we had fatal flaws and problems with the applications where we had issues that really either it couldn't be built or there wasn't enough money or there was something in many of the applications or the right-of-way wasn't considered or all different types of issues in the past. And this money evaporates on June 30th of 2023. So when that happens and we have projects that aren't far enough down the road, then technically we should have done a better job up front to make sure that they're successful in the end. That's my only concern.
And Wendy, this is Sally again. Who in the CDOT office will be doing this? Is this you or?
No, it's probably Lachelle, and her group will be looking over the project for
Michelle and Junior.
concurrence and a reality check. So if you need help putting the application together, I would make an outreach to Lachelle to begin with, so that way she can get the right member of her staff working with you.
Okay, thank you.
Lachelle Davis, CDOT. I think that, as we review the applications, I think 2 weeks, maybe I'll eat my words later, but I think 2 weeks is fine. If there's something that we need to visit, go on site or something, then we can do that for, on an as-needed basis, but I think probably we're fine.
Victoria?
Is it okay with you if we went ahead and just sent you our draft apps even before the deadline to get your input before we might
Yeah,
help spread
absolutely.
it out for you?
Yeah, we've done that with TAP and with Off-System Bridge. And
Yeah, I'm happy to do that too. I'll try and get it to you before then.
Brian?
So one other question, and please forgive me if I sound like a rascal, but since it's in the project application, one of the criteria is project readiness. So what would happen if an entity, identifies their project's really shovel-ready for starting after, in 2020, finishing before 2021, and they get maximum 20 points for their application, but, the project isn't really that shovel-ready, and it ends up being 21, 22. What would happen then?
Good question. You stumped us.
Not
I guess-
that any of us would do that intentionally, but
yeah,
knowing that
things happen.
sometimes things slip, and
I'd say it probably depends on how many applications we get and if your project bumped another project, or if we could, switch projects, timing around. Obviously, if we have the 3 years to spend the money, we could still spend it in another year. But like I said, if it bumped another project that was ready and could have gotten funding, then that would be another discussion with TAC that we need to have.
That's true, maybe.
So-
I don't know. Look at the number of hands that went up of people submitting applications. I mean, $6.5 million is a lot of money, but what we learned from in the TIP process a couple weeks ago, it's really not that much money. So, we could end up having to deal with that.
And Brian, as a practical matter, I think that if a jurisdiction, any jurisdiction, starts fudging or being a rascal, I was going to use my Elmer Fudd, but I figured, no, I won't do it. But if they start being a rascal, right, and they start kind of fudging either performance measures or dates or even the scope of the project to get a project and then not deliver that scope, or again, find out that those scores were probably misleading from the benefit or even the timeline, there is not a mechanism in place where PPACG can do anything about it. Let's face it. We have no authority or power over any of our jurisdictions. But I think what you would see is that the committee itself would then sort of self-police. I think if you're a hockey fan, it's one of those things where if the jurisdiction starts doing that, I think that jurisdiction would find that all of a sudden they're not getting funding voted for during the TIP process, and they're not finding that other jurisdictions are willing to move things around or be of assistance. So it's one of those things that I think we're all on our honor to use our professional integrity to put together the most accurate picture of the project that we can, and if somebody doesn't follow that, I think you guys will punish them far greater and with more veracity than I ever could.
And with that also, that's the goal of meeting with CDOT ahead of time and having them review is to have that check on the actual project, timeframe. They're a pretty good judge of timeframes and how those projects can move forward, unless, unforeseen circumstances.
Right.
Kevin, can we just clarify what shovel-ready is? Is that clearances obtained already and ready for construction, or is that, do we have projects that are going to need clearances?
Yeah, I imagine they probably will need clearances, so maybe shovel-ready is a bit strong. That was the term that was used in another application process for another region. So we can change that wording or, adjust what it means, but I imagine that they're not going to have the clearances because they're going to need CDOT on that, but maybe design-ready or already designed.
For our purposes, it would be fair to say just the complexity of the project. Someone's coming in and needs to get a bunch of 404 permits and right-of-way acquisitions and things like that. I think we're all know enough about the process to know that that ain't happening. So maybe we'll just call it more of like complexity or something. And then, again, based on your professional judgment, because you're all professionals, as the applications are being reviewed for ultimate programming, you can decide, like, yeah, this is spot on, this is the amount of time this is going to take, or, yeah, they're way overly ambitious, let's not program this and take a chance on losing this funding.
So we can just remove the words shovel-ready altogether and just base it on what the timeframes we established with CDOT, if that works better.
You and Tim.
Two questions. First of all, does the project need to be in the 2045 project list?
I think ideally, but it's not a requirement.
Okay.
Because it's not federal.
Right. Okay. And second, I'm looking at minimum project size. There's a general expectation, but my understanding is the MPO can kind of set its own minimum when we start talking, when we go through our workshop. Is that?
Yes, that is correct. We've been advised that the minimum is a recommendation, so because of just the sheer amount of work that would go into making the project get through, but it is a decision that the MPO can make.
Okay.
And back to your question about the 2045 plan, that one of the criteria is, does it support a regional local plan? And that's just a plan from your jurisdiction to show that you actually have support for it and that it's been thought through. And so it kind of goes to that instead of just the regional plan. It can be a local one as well.
Okay.
Any other questions for Catherine? Any comments on the schedule, the application, or the scoring criteria or feedback we would like to give her now so that we should be ready to vote on this next month? Sally?
I always have to be reminded of the calendar year when you say 2021. When does that, what month does that split or break?
Are you talking about for like the project readiness piece or
Yes.
for the project readiness piece, those are going to be fiscal year, which is state, and that ends June 30th. So,
Okay, so
that
it's a
2023 final
July
date is
1st.
June 30th. 2023 is when everything needs to be spent. And so each of those is backed into the June previous.
Okay, good, thank you.
Whereas our schedule is on calendar year.
Yeah.
So, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm not to be confused with our federal fiscal year.
Yes, which is October 1st, isn't it?
Chinese New Year's, I think it's the year of the rat or something.
Any other
Then there's
questions?
the Mayan calendar also.
Yeah,
So-
just throw them all out there.
Just recap what was said. And
Oh, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
And so, just to recap the comments I've had or the question, so the main thing is to get rid of the wording for shovel-ready, and we'll just leave that off. But I haven't received any other changes to the schedule unless we're okay with this now and want to add another month onto the application process. But otherwise, that's the only change I've heard.
And it's probably in your best interest to get it to CDOT as soon as possible so they can give you some feedback so we can avoid the fatal flaws so we can spend our $6.5 million. Okay, if there's nothing else, we'll go on to 7B. fiscal year 2024 tip draft. Catherine?
Okay, so we have begun the process of developing the update or the new federal fiscal year 2021-2024 tip. This is going to replace the current one, that's the 19 through 21. It's going to carry the first 2 years over, and then we did a call for projects for 23 and 24. That was a couple weeks ago. And so based on the project scoring criteria and the project selection workshop, those 23 and 24 allocations have a suggested program, project program, which is in your attachment. They're the regional projects. Attachment 1, I believe, is that one. Oh, no, attachment 1 was the tip link, to the draft tip link, and then attachment 2 was just the regional projects. So the full tip includes CDOT projects in the region, the regional projects, as well as transit regional projects, but your attachment just has the regional allocation, just so you had that one more clear in front of you. So the draft document is the plan is to take it TAC and the board next month for release to the public. This requires a 30-day public comment period like our long-range plan does as well. Once that public comment period is over, then we bring you the comments any comments that we received, give you 30 days with those to see if you want to make any adjustments, and then it goes back to the boards for final approval. The plan there is for April of a final approval, and then this new document doesn't go into effect until July 1 of 2020, or the state fiscal year. Technically, I guess, federal fiscal year, October, but CDOT works on the fiscal year. So this new document, it doesn't go into effect until that new year starts. Until then, the current one will stand. So that the attachment has the draft update that we made some adjustments to from previous years, but nothing substantially was changed there, just moved things around, and some of the things from the TIP policies and procedures document was included, and I just combined it all together to make it not doubling up on documents. So.
Any questions for Catherine? Comments?
Okay. Sorry. And one more thing regarding this. So the big handout that you received says unscheduled pool. So this, based on the policies and procedures that we went through earlier in the year, we discussed having an unscheduled pool. So these are just projects that are in the pipeline. They're not, these don't mean that your projects are in the TIP. They're not necessarily going to get funding. It's just to show that we have these in the pipeline, and they're going to potentially request funding in the future. The list that I've pulled together is from the TIP selection workshop. So all the projects that you submitted for the 23 and 24 funding, the ones that didn't get funding or all the funding are listed in this document. And so I would just ask that you review that. Let me know if you want me to remove any of them, change the funding, or add anything else that you'd like to have in this list of planned projects. I've put all of them in 25 and 26 based on what, the separation, but I need to adjust them because we said that we would do it by the planned allocation amount each year. And so I do need to move some funds over into future years. So if you have a suggestion on when you'd like to move that as well, then, or I'll do it based on kind of the 2045 project score. If there's any questions on the scheduled pool. And if I don't hear from you, you're going to hear from me.
John?
And actually, I have a question for the committee. I think when we developed the TIP, there was an underlying sense that if a jurisdiction voluntarily pulled a project back or sort of said, hey, this is a project that's in there, but we're going to, for the good of the region, we're going to pull that back. But we just want that somehow noted so that way 2 years from now, if all the people around the table change, there is a recognition of that jurisdiction's cooperation. And so does this meet that need? Is there something else that we need to do? Because, again, we want to be responsive to what your request is. And so I just want to make sure that we've addressed that And if not, we are open to suggestions on how to somehow make sure that we do memorialize those comments that were made during those discussions. But if you're good with this, and everyone's comfortable, then we're good. I just want to make sure that we brought up that we did listen, we're trying to be responsive, but that doesn't mean we've necessarily hit the mark, and we definitely want to get your input on that.
Karen?
Just a minor comment on the program list for Manitou Springs, Rexton Ave, and sorry I didn't see this earlier, but it says it's the intent of the project to implement the findings of the mobility study presently underway. That's kind of true, but sort of indirectly. The study that will more directly inform this is called the Rexton Ave Functionality Study. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
Okay, I can adjust that.
Okay, thanks.
Since that doesn't change the scope of the project, it's just where it's informing.
Any other questions or comments for Catherine? Any other comments from Catherine? Okay. I have a quick thing real quick. So either John or Jessica sent me an email. Are we going to have our standing CDOT item be 7A in the future? Is that what that was?
Yes, in the future, it'll be 7A. It's just, you had already approved the
Right.
agenda when we tacked it on, so we just made it 7F or D or whatever it is.
I just want to make sure I remembered that correctly. F.
So, but from now on, we'll move that up.
Okay.
So that way, there's always something going on from CDOT, so that way we figured it would be good to have.
Okay, all right, thank you. Item 7D, 2045 draft with public comments. Catherine.
So as part of the next phase, we've closed out the public comment period, and we received a few comments, not necessarily from the public, but we have some from El Paso County, Fountain, and Federal Highway. We're mainly using the Federal Highway piece in this because that's when we received their comments. So I handed out a new summary to this board that's updated compared to what went out in the agenda. That's because we received the Federal Highway comments this week. So just a general summary of what we received. El Paso County requests that the State Highway 21 Power South extension be added to the fiscally constrained list. This is private funding, so staff felt that we could add this because it wouldn't adjust any of the funding that went to the regional amount. And Fountain agreed with El Paso County's regarding the powers extension, and we also have CDOT that's working in this process, and they are happy to have help with this process and make sure that gets on the list. So that's been adjusted onto the draft that's online. We also received an El Paso County comment that would like a place in the study that examines the limited access loop east of Powers, and it would be a regional study. We felt that this fit within the funding pool of the regional studies that we allocated a few million to, I believe. And so we felt like that fit within that study, making it consistent with the plan and didn't need to add that specific study to it. And then finally, the Federal Highway comments. In general, it was, please update federal language to make sure it matches what the federal language says or how, specifics that way. So it's nothing that changes the actual document. In that sense, it's just making sure the language follows exactly what they suggest. And then the other item was just making sure we reference our public involvement plan, make sure that everybody knows that we are following those guidelines that we set, and just making sure we clarify the public participation process and what process we used. So just a couple of clarifications, but no big changes yet. Yes, yet. We're still waiting on a few more comments from them. We'll see. So with that, we've made some adjustments to the document. We've uploaded the draft document to the website. The link is attached or in the attachment area. And the plan is to information this month, action and approval, recommended approval to the board, and hopefully final approval in January. And then move on to the next one.
Rinse and repeat.
Any John?
No, I was just going to add to that. The whole sort of rinse and repeat and start over again. Next year, we'll start with some of the assumptions that that were done as part of the small area forecast, and that will sort of, Will Mast is here. So some of the concerns that people have brought to our attention in the past, we've heard you, and that's going to be something that we'll tackle early next year, so that way we're in good shape moving forward to start the process with a very solid foundation.
Comments, questions for Catherine? Catherine, do you have any comments? Okay. Item 7E, project obligation deadline status report. Catherine.
Okay, so this is just the spreadsheet actually hasn't changed much since the last month's update. I think we moved one project over into the good category. We still have some projects that are going well, but maybe there's some holdups, so we're still working on that. We're working, CDOT and PPACG are working closely with jurisdictions to make sure that we're keeping on track. So the spreadsheet hasn't really changed too much, but we have provided a December 6th deadline to the jurisdictions to request them to tell us if they would like to return their funds or not for a project that isn't moving. That deadline is so that we can get it into the December TAC for discussion and talk about how much money we potentially had to reprogram to other projects. I will say that we have a couple projects that are planning to return some funds, and then we just had that amendment for $300,000 for the travel survey, so we do have some money to reprogram 2 projects. So just keep that in mind for that. And then, so once the December 6th happens, I hope to have a better understanding of where projects are and how much money we might have to give back. John, do you want to talk about that other piece?
Yes, and then there's 2 things. First, we have been talking about the rescission and saying, hey, rescission is sort of the mechanism by which the feds come and sort of take the difference between the apportionment and contract authority. The Senate just put in the bill that is headed to the president the $7.6 billion to remove the rescission. So that rescission is now sort of off the table. So the funds should be available and not have been swept by the feds before we can even get there. The second thing is, and Wendy, hopefully you're still on the line and can help me with this, we're going to preface this comment with we still want everyone to sort of hard charge and continue to work as diligently as possible to deliver the projects as fast as possible. But we have learned, and again, thank you to Wendy for really kind of bearing down on folks and making sure that we get complete answers with all of the information. Some of the different funding sources that rolled over from the last bill, MAP 21, MAP 21 into the FAST Act, as those rolled over into the different TIP years, they would have received different account numbers that have an expiration date. Those expiration dates are sort of different by each of the different fund numbers. So therefore, thank you, Wendy. And so the bottom line on this is not all of the projects that we've been saying have to be obligated by June of 2020, not all of those projects may necessarily still need to happen in June of 2020. So Wendy has worked diligently to sort of put together a list. We're verifying the list so to the extent that we're going to give a call to the Eric, I forget Eric's last name, kind of make sure that we're all on the same page. Once we get verification of that, we'll come back and say, hey, for some of these projects, you actually have a little more time. But until then, we didn't want to say, hey, it's definite, you all have an extra year, have everyone celebrate, take the week off and everything, and then you come back only to find that you're not one of those projects. So please continue to work diligently. But that being said, once we know and we're confident in the number, we'll give that out. And I think there's a couple of things that are positive about this in that right now we have all of these projects hitting the environmental folks and all the right-of-way folks and all the other reviewers. And so there's sort of that glut this way. And even at your jurisdictions, you've got a whole bunch of different projects being worked on. If we can then pinpoint the very specific projects that are definitely going to go bad in 2020, we can focus all our efforts within the jurisdiction on those, as well as the CDOT reviewers and the CDOT review process to make sure that those then move forward, and the ones that have a little more time we can stretch out. But again, until we actually know how it's all going to pan out, please continue to crack the whip on those folks. Just give them bread and water. Make sure they work weekends to get as much done on those projects as we possibly can. But once we know for certain that we're good extending that deadline on some of those, we will share that. Wendy, did I put that in as distinct way as possible, or should did I say too much? Is there any questions on that? I know we've been saying for the last year, hey, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, and now we're having a change. So if there's any questions, happy to answer them. But again, I think we were just making sure we were doing our due diligence, that we didn't want to go to jurisdiction and said, your project's going to go away, you need to cancel it, have them cancel it, only to find out later that, oh yeah, I guess you had a little bit more time. So again, thanks to Wendy and others at CDOT for making sure that they dug deep and made people give them some very uncomfortable answers. But I think we have a better picture now moving forward. And Karen, did you have a question?
I do. I just wanted to clarify that this means that it's good news for these projects. They're in the will meet deadlines list. It doesn't provide any more good news for the projects not making progress list. Just to double check.
I think it's actually the opposite. I think it's more on the ones that aren't making progress. They could potentially, if they are closer to meeting progress, then they could potentially, if they have an extra year, then they could actually, obligate the funds. There are some projects that haven't made any progress, and regardless, they might not be moving forward. We'll have a better idea of what that is hopefully soon. But it could also help the will meet deadlines, because there are some in the orange that are considered, moving along well right now, but there could be a snag, so it could help those as well. Okay. It just depends on what that holdup might be, or if there is one. So
okay.
It could potentially help all of them.
So we'll wait to hear from CDOT about these, or should we be more proactive about some of our projects on that list?
Like I said, keep cracking the whip.
Yeah.
Keep pushing hard on getting those projects done. Because here's the other thing, is even if you had an extra year, remember, if we're always going to the public and saying, boy, there's not enough money for transportation, and then they're like, oh, really? Well, then how much do you just have offhand? The number should always be sort of close to zero. We get about $8-9 million a year. In theory, the federal process says that should be obligated on an annual basis. So the number should always be about zero. The number's not at zero. And so we want to get rid of this glut of projects and get those projects delivered. So to the extent, for the next week or so, you want to go ahead and keep pushing. Don't tell your consultant. Again, keep them locked in the room and working on the project. But as soon as we verify with that, Catherine will send out something to everybody that says, these are the projects that have a little bit more time, and these are the projects that don't. And there's no guarantee that the projects that need the time are the ones that are going to get the time. As Wendy said, I think very well, these numbers were hard-coded, back when the switch came back to when they were in the tip, if I heard her correctly. So it's not based on who needs the time, it's based on what it is. So that's why we want to verify before we start releasing that information.
Any questions for Catherine? Any closing statements from Catherine?
Thanks for putting up with me for 6 months.
Thanks for putting up with us. Item 7F, CDOT update. Is there anyone in particular I should direct this to, or just say CDOT update and we'll see who jumps on it?
Well, since they're not in the room, we'll see if we can guide the conversation. Kathleen Collins, is this so everyone should have a handout from Kathleen, and then Kathleen was going to talk about it real quick. Kathleen, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here. So Wendy thought it was a good idea too. What we're doing is we're developing a 10-year pipeline of projects for the statewide plan, and of course the MPOs will contribute their list to the pipeline of projects. But we wanted to share with you the guidelines and principles that the Transportation Commission adopted to guide the selection of projects for the pipeline of projects. And they are in this handout here that you have in front of you: safety, mobility, economic vitality, asset management, the strategic nature of a project or its corridor for the area, and then regional priority. That is actually sort of a next step. It's not a true criteria. What we are going to do is have a joint TPR meeting with the different TPRs in Region 2, and then have the RTD of Region 2, Karen Rowe, meet with them along with staff and meet to decide what projects get fed into that horizon that's 5 years and out, because everybody knows the fiscally constrained portion of the projects are going into the 4-year STIP. And also the STIP, the current STIP has just been released for public review, and I believe the TC is on board to adopt the STIP in December. Is that right, Wendy? That's what I understood.
That's correct. That's our 23 STIP, so our 2020 to 2023 STIP. And then the pipeline of projects that we're talking about, most of those will be included in the 23-24 projects, and the pipeline projects will be part of the 21 to 24 process. That will be happening. Go ahead. Sorry. That starts. Well, then that's when we have the joint TPR meeting in February, as usual, and everything moves forward from there. So between now and the joint TPR meeting, we need to get projects on the agenda for review with the MPOs. So that should be coming here real soon.
Yep. So the other thing, when we met with the rural TPRs, we asked them, because everybody has different views of what safety, mobility, economic vitality, asset management, and strategic nature may mean for your area. So we gave them what the TC definition was, and then they also gave us what they thought theirs were, and then they went through an exercise to prioritize projects for the TPR. And so what we're eventually going to do is roll everything up at the region level in terms of, and have discussions about what gets fed into the 10-year pipeline. You have anything else to add, Wendy?
Just from the standpoint that PPACG is a TMA, so they don't necessarily have this same process. So because you have more of a say about how things are programmed in your area, and this is trying to put the TPR areas more on a level playing field with the MPOs, and the fact that there'll be a list of prioritized projects after this process is done, just like each of the MPOs has at this point, so that when different types of funding becomes available, we can look at the list statewide and we can say, oh, this project meets that. This project is good for this funding source, just like we do with the MPOs, and that way everybody has a shot at having a project out of the funding sources as they become available. And we don't have a fire drill to come up with projects.
Yes.
And it's all been vetted through a thorough planning process, and it's part of a long-range plan. And that way, we're not reinventing the wheel every single time.
Did you guys have anything else for the CDOT report? Michelle, Junior, anybody?
I'm good, thank you.
I want to mention, I shared with Catherine that the Senate Bill 262 and 267 project list that CDOT's been debating has been approved by the Transportation Commission. So that is good news for everybody. It's a big list of projects that will impact across the state, and we're pretty excited that it passed. So that's good news. And then also we have some National Highway Freight Program projects. There's 14 of them that were presented to the TC for approval, and they were also approved. And they were also supported by our Freight Advisory Council. And I just want to say hello to Jason, if he's there, because he attended the last FAC meeting, the Freight Advisory Council meeting. So that's all I have to report. Wendy, do you have anything else to report?
Good news, bad news, you already got it with the rescission being gone, and the bad news is the fact that we still have an issue as we move forward with Fast Act money expiring. So those are the only two things I really have for today.
Okay, Catherine?
Okay, so that's it for us, I guess.
Just to follow up what Kathleen said, as far as projects, we have State Highway 21 and Power and Research. Interchange was on there. We have the ramp metering Phase 2, South Academy paving. Was there one more missing? I feel like.
What was the transit stuff on that list?
The transit hasn't been approved yet, but.
That's right, that's next month.
But yeah, hopefully next month we'll know more on that. But I think those are the main ones.
How does the South Academy resurfacing, is that the same section as the build award?
Yes, it is tied to that, from my understanding. Mm-hmm.
Any questions for Catherine or CDOT or any burning thoughts, comments? No, we're doing good. Okay. Item 8, member entity announcements. John.
Two things. Last month when we brought the Tri-County study to you all, the direction we received was, hey, make sure you reach out to the non-MPO folks. Make sure this is a benefit to them. We had a meeting set up yesterday in Teller County and Divide to meet with Park in Teller County. And the weather in Park County was such that they could not make it. So we've rescheduled that meeting for December 4th here at PPACG. So hopefully, weather permitting, we'll have that input. So we didn't forget. We are working on that. They do have copies of the scope to read through and give us their comments. Initially, everything we've heard has been very positive. So hopefully, next month, we'll come back and say, yes, we've got the everyone lined up, and we've got the revised scope, because I'm sure both Park and Teller are going to have some things added to that. And then at that point, if you still are amenable to it, we will then develop an application to put into the multimodal options fund for part of the funding. And then Region 2, Wendy, I think, has some returned TAP funding that she would be able to use. That would be the recommended funding cocktail for bringing that forward. The second thing that I wanted to bring up real quickly is, Mark, you want to come up here real quick? So he introduced himself really quickly, but you were like, so he said his name was Mark, and he said PPACG. What did that mean? So this is Mark Northrup. Come on in. Find a microphone. He's he's our new planner with PPACG, and you'll be seeing him around a lot of the different meetings moving out. He comes to us 16 years from Dr. Cog.
Long time.
Yeah. So it's about time PPACG stole someone from Dr. Cog instead of the other way around.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Any other member entity announcements? Rick?
Yes, as everyone knows, CDOT's Bill Grant application was approved, which included funding for Charter Oak Ranch Road, the access road to Fort Carson's Gate 19. It's a very important project for us, and we wanted to thank everyone that was involved in all of the various funding efforts to finally bring this project to a point of where we can start construction. On a personal note, I'd like to give my personal thanks to our fellow board member, Victoria Chavez, and for her In her role in the county, she has provided unwavering support for the Charter Oak Ranch Road project over the 12 years that the two of us have worked together on this project. And again, Victoria, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thanks to both of you. Thank you all. Yes, you have the tenacity to keep it going. Hey, don't forget. Hey, nope, we're still here. All right, come on, we're ready. So yeah, well, I am too. If you're a pain, then I'm a pain. So yeah, that'll be great for the region to get those projects all bundled and put together. You said pain. I just agreed to it. Any other member entity? I was going to say, the fact that you waited is amazing. Brian, you always have an announcement.
Well, not always, but
Usually.
But thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome.
So last week, we released both the 2045 transit plan and the specialized plan. So that was a combined planning process. PPACG is funding the specialized plan, and we're funding the transit plan. So both of those are out for public review and comment, and I think they can be reached through MMT's website and PPACG's website as well. So, 30 days from last Wednesday, whatever date that is. And again, thanks to everybody who was involved. There were several people here that were on the stakeholder group and cooperation of PPACG. It's a good way to do planning with the cooperation and, looking at the best way for customers to get around in the region. It kind of made sense to combine both the specialized plan and the transit plan. That's the way we did it 5 years ago, and it's worked well again this time. So thanks, everybody.
All right, I'll throw a quick one out there. So for those of you who know about the South Academy Highlands project, we are going to be continuing Venatucci Boulevard north to B Street. And for those who are really dying to see girder installation, we'll be putting in the girders for that bridge next Tuesday. So if you see giant pieces of concrete coming down the interstate very early in the morning on Monday, you'll know why. So hopefully we'll have that project done. I'm hoping by May. I want it to warm up before we pave it. So we'll have the bridge in place, and then eventually the road should open somewhere in the May time frame. Sally?
I just wanted to mention that Woodland Park has an opening for Public Works Director, City Engineer. So if you know of anyone that might be interested in working in a small community with great council members and citizens, we would love to have them apply.
Okay. Anybody else? Items for future TAC meetings. Catherine? Yep.
I have 5 to 6 items next month too, sorry.
Oh, no.
So the 2045 approval, the TIP public release approval, safety target approval, potentially the multimodal option fund approval, application and criteria, and then the project status updates for information, and then UPWP, just an information item on that as well.
Tim?
Any ideas, timeline that we're going to be looking at the workshop for the MMOF?
I think I put a tentative in mid-March, I think March 19th. That got changed. I just put in a date there. I think it's a Wednesday morning.
So, yes.
I was thinking of.
Yeah, that's what's on the packet.
Oh, I put 2019. That's definitely going to be 2020.
We're all going to get in the time machine.
I will adjust those all in 2020.
Catherine, you want us to vote on that next day? Is that enough time to do all of our notices and meet all the rules that exist in this lovely world?
Yeah. Is that the day before the tax?
Correct. Yeah.
Let me look at that and reassess maybe any suggestions.
Right, I'm just trying to make sure we're meeting all the,
Unless the next day's the information item.
well, the 19th is the TAC meeting, so that's what I'm trying to figure out. So I highly doubt we can have the meeting before the TAC meeting and then vote on it at the TAC meeting, because I can't imagine those would be the rules. Because you have to have notice to the public about what we're voting on. Okay.
Catherine, are you going to have a workshop for the approval of for the scoring criteria?
A workshop for the scoring criteria?
Yeah.
That was you commenting when I asked, do you have any comments on the scoring criteria about 20 minutes ago?
Oh, is that what that was?
Yeah, that's what that was.
I mean, we can have a
Okay.
workshop if
No.
you want me to.
You might want to take the gavel away from her, she might hurt you with it.
I can send out a new updated date and information on that to give it more time. I'm not sure what I was thinking there.
That's okay.
I'll have to revisit my thinking process.
That's fine. So then, just for the record, I will reiterate, yes, my question was if you have any comments on the application or the scoring criteria, please let her know as soon as possible so we can vote on it at that December meeting, so we're not adjusting it in real time, and we'll have exactly what we want on that agenda.
I'm remembering something about that now.
Victoria?
You might want to go ahead and just change that date for the CDOT review instead of having the applications due 2 weeks earlier. Just flip it around and have the applications due on the 28th and just require that all of us get with CDOT beforehand and have their approval.
Okay.
And that'll make it, I think, easier for you all as well, and it'll give us all 2 more weeks. So, head nods, like and head nods. Thank you.
Okay, any objections to Victoria's suggestion? Especially from CDOT. You guys are good? Same timeline, just actual application deadline switches.
And if you could just, when you send that to them, or you can send it to me and I'll send it to them, but make sure that both of us are either CC'd or included on that, just so I know what's going on. Okay.
And if you have any comments on the scoring criteria or the schedule or the application, please send them to Catherine. Even though we know we know that that scoring meeting is going to change somehow, some way. But
I think so.
okay. Any other items for future TAC meetings? Any comments? Okay, then we are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Drive safe.